Hello, Movie Mavens. Welcome back to the B Movies channel. My name is Bailey, and I put the B in B Movies. So welcome back to all of our October content. Just a reminder, you're gonna get 5 videos this October, so I'm looking forward to it. I am joining you today as obviously Reagan from The Exorcist. To address the elephant in the room, no, I have still not seen the new Exorcist. To be quite honest, I was not really impressed by the trailer. The reviews are not good, so I will probably wait until it is out somewhere. I am probably going to tear it apart. After Halloween ends, I don't trust David Gordon Green to take on any more franchises, and so I just wish that, he would maybe do some original horror instead. But I still, since it is the spooky season, since it is The Exorcist, I thought what better costume to add into this year's Halloween content but Reagan herself. So, to get us started, let's go ahead and do our weekly recap. Also, as a reminder, I know the flow's a little bit weird, but we are releasing 6 pieces Monday through Saturday, as well as Bite Size Sunday, so there will be a piece out tomorrow. So instead of a usual, here's what we talked about this week, here's what we talked about with the addition of another piece coming tomorrow. So on Monday, we talked about the VHS franchise, which, something different today, instead of a deep dive on the franchise itself, I'm actually going to do a review of VHS 85. I want to go ahead and warn you now, I was not a fan of VHS 85. And I love this franchise, except for Viral. I've loved the 2 that they've done recently with 94 and 99. I was not a fan of VHS 85. But I thought I would go ahead and review it, give some of my thoughts on it, since Monday we did talk about the rest of the franchise. On Tuesday, we did an ode to KP, my mom, and my brother-in-law. They have the same birthday. All 3 of us are huge October people. We love horror movies, and so I really wanted to do an homage to the 2 of them because, KP was a very important person in my life, and Matt, my brother-in-law, has been in my life for over half of my life because my sister and I are 15 years apart. Dang bangs that I'm growing out. I don't know why I cut my bangs in January. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea, but I did it, and now we're suffering the consequences. But I just really wanted to do something nice to honor my mom and to honor my brother-in-law because they're both very supportive. My mom was, obviously, like, that would be a little bit alarming if I say things like that. I promise I'm fine. Wednesday we talked about Fear Itself, which I still think is so criminally underrated. For those who don't know, Fear Itself was a reimagining of Masters of Horror that Mick Garris and company brought to the mainstream on NBC. It only lasted for 1 season, and I think it's a shame because I think it's a wonderful anthology series, and there are some episodes that are early on in the career of Elizabeth Moss, of Anna Kendrick, Ethan Embry's in an episode. Like, there are so many people, and it's so innovative, and I just think it was, like a lot of things we cover here, criminally underrated and unfortunately canceled way before its time. Thursday we talked about punk rock horror, not in the sense of like punk rock music, but in the sense of this kind of DIY, grungy horror. It just, you know what I'm talking about. It may or may not have punk rock music, but it has that punk rock feel to it. And then today, we talked about the Child's Play franchise. As a kid, Chucky kind of bothered me a little bit, but the older that I got, and with the series and Jennifer Tilly, I love the Child's Play franchise. I truly do. And, controversially, I like Bride of Chucky and Seed of Chucky so much. I just love both of them, and I know that a lot of people think they're bad. I really enjoy them. And then tomorrow, and this is actually going to be our deep dive today, so it's like a little teaser, we're going to talk about my favorite Final Girls, and I already know some of my choices are going to be seen as controversial, and we'll get into it. I figured I would explain myself. I figured I would explain myself first. so that way we can already do it. So now that we have our little roundup, let's go ahead and do our Bite Size Sunday teaser. And if you're new here, Bite Size Sundays are Instagram exclusive. They only live on the B Movies channel Instagram, which is at B Movies channel, same as our YouTube. And they are typically, it's just focused on one piece of content, like a show or a movie, or I even covered Billie Eilish's What Was I Made For music video. And it's things that I want to talk about for the better or worse, but there's just not enough there for a piece, and so it's usually just a few sentences that are Instagram exclusive. And then here on YouTube, I tease what the next Bite Size Sunday is going to be, and that's only teased here. So basically, Bite Size Sundays are very exclusive. And so this week's hint is, you gonna write us a Bite Size Sunday, Bailey. And so like last week, think about what this is a play on, like what movie that line comes from. And it should be easy to figure out what the theme is. Because for those who don't know, in October, instead of one piece of content, we're doing 10. So you're getting 10 movie recommendations that have all been curated based on a certain theme. So, you gonna write us a Bite Size Sunday, Bailey. Just think about what movie that is a play off of. As another hint, it's one of my favorite horror movies / just movies of all time. And so think about where that movie belongs, and that should help you decipher what this week's Bite Size Sunday will be. So just to recap before we dive into, we have a couple deep dives today. Because again, I'm doing longer content. I just think this is fun. Monday, talked about the VHS franchise. Tuesday was an ode to KP and my brother-in-law, Matt. Wednesday was Fear itself. Yesterday was punk rock horror. Today's the Child's Play franchise, and tomorrow we're going to talk about my favorite final girls. What a mouthful. I wrote that. Just letting you all know, I am the one who wrote that, and I was like, that will be easy to say. There will be no repercussions of this. So, I have exciting news. And I know we're late. But here's what happened. To peel the curtain back just a little bit, we film a little in advance. So I sincerely filmed the Greylock deep dive video, and then a couple days later, Rob Gavagan posted tape 10. And I was like, dang it. So, you're welcome, because if I had not filmed that, we would not have gotten that tape that soon. I can promise you. But we are going to do a deep dive of tape 10, because like I said, whenever new videos of the horror anthologies, I have VHS on the noggin. When there are updates within these horror ARG and analog horror series, we will cover them. And depending on how we covered it on the site, we will update information on the site. And then we will also cover it in the videos. And so, like, for example, I already know Halloween, there's a new Project Earth coming. So the video that following Friday, we will talk about it. Because just set your calendars now. Subscribe to Barry's channel if you haven't. I'll go ahead and put the Project Earth piece and channel info, Barry's channel info, everything in the description box below, because Halloween Day, we're getting a new episode of Project Earth, and based on the last one, I think it's gonna be very good. But I digress. So there is a new episode of Greylock. I know we're late. I'm sorry. Just again, to shatter the illusion a little bit, we film a week or two in advance, and so I know that the video's been out for a couple weeks, but we are going to deep dive on it. So we will be fine. We're going to deep dive it. It's going to be okay. Apologies for the delay. But to start us off, let's go ahead and talk about my favorite final girls, because I know that there are some controversial choices on here. The most glaringly being that Sally Hardesty and Nancy are neither one on my list. but I will explain myself, I promise. So, my favorite final girls, here's what I look for in a final girl. I want to see some level of personal growth. I want a very high level of badassery. I even want a complex backstory if we can get one. So, the first on my list, and this is in no particular order, is Laurie Strode. The Halloween franchise is my favorite. Laurie, even though she has no idea who Michael is in the first film, just goes into pure survival mode. We get "do as I say now," which becomes a catchphrase for her throughout the series. And I just think watching that switch in her brain just click and immediately get the kids out, start, she just immediately goes into survival mode. And I really think that is cool to witness because, she starts out at the beginning of the movie very timid, very shy. Her friends, tease her about her crush, things like that. And then by the end, she's stabbing people with knitting needles. And so I love to see that growth and that transformation. And that's why next on the list is Sidney Prescott, because Sidney Prescott is kind of similar in that she almost flips the script. And with Michael Myers and Jason and Freddy, they never seem to be able to be eliminated fully. And Sidney Prescott seems invincible. Even in Scream 4, when Emma Roberts' character, which she's trash, so this will be the only, we're mentioning it just for the sake of context, because Emma Roberts is awful. But even when Emma Roberts thinks that she's killed Sidney pulls through, and she still makes it out at the end. And so it's this really cool, just subversion of the trope, where instead of having, we get a different ghost face every single film. Whereas Sidney Prescott, with the exception of Scream 6, which I hope she's in Scream 7. I'm very excited for Scream 7 because I'm a Christopher Landon fan, and actually that ties into one of our final girls later on. You can probably guess who it is. But I just really, really like her character. And speaking of the Scream franchise, another one of my favorite girls is Gale Weathers. Because similar to Sidney, Gale seems indestructible. And even in Scream 6, they're obviously putting her character on ice. And I'm sure that without Sidney, Gale just doesn't fit into the formula as well. Because Gale and Sidney are like, First Wives Club sisters, are doing it for themselves. And so I think I think if Sidney had been back, I don't think that Gale would have been put on ice. But why I like Gale is she does not give a damn how she is perceived. She is going to do what it takes, and she doesn't care if she hurts your feelings. And I love this whole thing of she's never really been scared of Ghostface. Like, she's been more so scared of the harm he'll inflict, but she's not really scared of him. And I just think that she is also a bit of an anti-hero, and we really see her evolve throughout the franchise because, at the beginning, it goes from Sidney punching her in the face when she's trying to exploit her and not so graciously talk about her mother, to Scream 6, where she's tried to rebuild this life. She's trying to help these kids. My bangs are going to drive me nuts. So, yeah, Gale's another one where she just kind of breaks the mold for me. And I think she's really badass. And then next up, we have Erin Harson from You're Next. So first of all, I just love You're Next. I'm a big Adam Wingard, Simon Barrett fan, and I freaking love this movie. And I love that she's kind of like Laurie Strode, where she just goes from 0 to 60 in 0.5 seconds. And it comes out like she was basically raised in like this survivalist cult. And she completely tries to save all of these people and just completely takes over. And I think that it's so cool. And if you've seen You're Next, the biggest twist being her boyfriend was in on it. Like, it was an inside job. And so I think she's awesome. You're Next, I know, is a one-off, but I just love her character so much that she's one of my favorites. And then, keeping with the theme, Grace DeLomas from Ready or Not. If you haven't seen it, Samara Weaving, she marries into a family where they've made a deal with the devil to keep their wealth. And anytime anyone new marries into the family, they have to play a card game. Unfortunately, one of those games is hide and seek. And if you are caught before dawn, you are killed. And the thing that I love about Grace DeLomas is that she's not a damsel in distress. She can fully take care of herself. She makes it very clear from the beginning that she does not need anybody. And I just really appreciate that about her. And I just really like that. I know this is becoming more of a common theme, but I just love that she doesn't need anybody. My dogs, for those who don't know, if it's ever Jumpy, I love my dogs, but Pudge is a terrier and he's just a barker. And then Shiloh, for those who don't know, Shiloh had a bit of a rough time before he came into my family. And so he hates people. And so sometimes they'll just they think of themselves as a wolf pack, and so they'll start barking. I digress. But I just really love Grace because she's very self-sufficient. It's very clear from the beginning, and I just love that we're getting all of these final girls who are we're really starting to flesh out the final girl and give them a backstory and just really give them a complex, just give them complexity. And so, shout out to Grace DeLomas. Next up we have Ellen Ripley from the Alien franchise. There's not a lot I can say about Ellen Ripley. This is an obvious choice. Ripley is incredible. It's Sigourney Weaver, it's Alien and Aliens, which are two of the best horror movies / just movies of all time. She's another punch first, ask questions later. And Ripley is actually, if I do ever have children, which I don't want to ever birth children. So if I adopt a baby that I can name, I think Ripley's been on my list of names because I would love to pay homage to her. So next up, and this is why I was like Christopher Landon, Tree Gelbman from Happy Death Day. Happy Death Day and Happy Death Day to You, first of all, are just fun movies. They are so much fun. It's, for those unfamiliar, Tree keeps waking up every single morning on her birthday, which is also the day she's murdered. And so she has to figure out who the murderer is. And it's like Groundhog Day, but for a slasher. And I really like her because she starts out as just a stereotypical sorority character, and it gets really deep, and especially in the second one, she's faced with these major decisions of mortality, of life, and has to make some really big decisions. And so I just really like her. I also think she's very hot. Let's just be real. But I really think Tree Gelbman is very cool. I would love to honestly see a third Happy Death Day just to make it an even trilogy. But even if we only have Happy Death Day and Happy Death Day to You, I love both of them, and I'm glad that we got them. Next up on the list is Danny Arter from Midsummer, because she, throughout the whole movie, it's Ari Aster, so it's metaphors about being gaslit, about being abused. She's in this horrible relationship, and at the end she chooses herself. And you could technically consider her an anti-hero because, she does Christian, but she chooses herself. At the end, it's not her choosing between a townsperson and Christian. Danny chooses herself. And I just think she's a fascinating character. And then next up, so here is where it gets controversial. I think Alice Johnson from Nightmare on Elm Street is a better final girl than Nancy, and I'm sorry. I love Heather Langenkamp. I love her in Dream Warriors. I love her in the original Nightmare on Elm Street. I love her in New Nightmare. I mean, it's Heather Langenkamp, yeah, but you get what I mean. But Alice Johnson from Nightmare on Elm Streets 4 and 5, I love her character because she's a lot more complex than Nancy. She has, I mean, it's brutal. The murders in 4 and 5, oh my god, the kills are crazy. And she is just a more fascinating character to me. That I'm not here to knock Nancy, but I just like Alice Johnson a lot. And then to round out my top 10, I say Sienna Shaw from Terrifier 2. I think she's so cool. I love that she is this very artistic character. I love the backstory of her costume being related to her dad. I love that she seems to be this major figure that I'm assuming will be in Terrifier 3. And I just am obsessed with her character. Because I loved Terrifier 2. And I mean, I don't know what that says about me as a person. I just love that movie. And I just really think that Sienna Shaw is fascinating. And then for my honorable mentions, we have Dina Johnson from the Fear Street trilogy. I just love the Fear Street trilogy. I know that there have been rumors swirling for a while that we're getting another either round of a trilogy or there are going to be more movies coming. Fingers crossed that that's true. But I just love Dina Johnson, and I love how she, goes back and she finds out what really happened with Sarah Fear. And I think that the queer representation that she brings is awesome. And I just really, really like her character. And then for my other honorable mention, I said Sarah Connor. I know that Sarah Connor is not technically a horror final girl, but Terminator 2 is one of the best movies of all time. I will argue that into oblivion. And I think that she's worth the mention because you cannot tell me Linda Blair when she's doing those pull-ups, like, come on, man. And you fight Terminators, you get put away because everybody thinks you're insane. Come on. So those are my favorite final girls. I know that there are some controversial choices in here, but just remember, that doesn't mean that I don't like them. I just had to make some decisions, and so for me, personally, it's these top 10 with Dina and Sarah being honorable mentions. So now, because I'm saving the Greylock episode for last, because we have a lot to talk about, because it's a 20-minute video. Now we're going to do a little mini review of VHS 85. Okay. So, I had mentioned this up top. I love the VHS franchise minus VHS Viral. And this is not as bad as VHS Viral. Just gonna say that up top. So, don't worry. It's not like watching VHS Viral. But after 94 and 99, I had such high expectations for this installment. And I was extremely let down. So we're not going to do like a very in-depth review, but I do want to talk about a few things. The first being, as a disclaimer, I was born in 92. So I grew up in the 90s to mid to late aughts. But I was talking to my brother-in-law who grew up in the 80s and 90s. And it does not read 1985 to me at all. To me, this installment reads like late 80s, early 90s. So the wraparound is like a hard copy inside edition style news program talking about this lab and a college where they've found some sort of entity, and they're basically just having him watch a bunch of TV programs. He can kind of morph into essentially morph a little bit into the other members of the team that are studying him, and the doctor behind it is just completely enthralled with him and is just seeing it as a means of communication. Long story short, one of the other doctors and I think her and her assistant leave, and he winds up, his curiosity gets the better of him, and he and everyone in that lab wind up getting killed. And so that's the wraparound. But see, to me, Inside Edition hard copy, that was all late 80s, I would even argue early to mid 90s, because that's what, there's a joke in Casper about it. To me, that's not 85. So the first segment, which is technically 2 segments, it's technically another wraparound, I was intrigued. I like the hard copy stuff up top. I was like, yeah, I'm not sure about that. But then the segment, I was like, okay, I can get into this. It's a group of teens going to a lake. Someone starts shooting. And then everyone that was shot in the water or on the boat comes back to life. And, they still have their injuries. And I felt so bad. There is one girl that gets her jaw shot off. And, the rest of them, it's not, it's bad. But I'm like, that girl can't even talk. That would be my luck. I'd be the one that got, Anyway, so they're trying to figure out, what happened, because they're like, we're clearly, we died. And I'm like, okay, it's giving Hell House 3, okay, I can get into this. And so then in the next segment, it's a Spanish news channel, and to me, again, they don't read 1985. And I feel like there was so much that could have been done. Because the mid-80s, and we're like, come on, it's slasher, it's everything is very gratuitous. There's so much to play off of. Satanic Panic, that was one thing I was surprised was not touched at all. I was like, that would be prime Satanic Panic. But there was nothing with it. So, long story short, the building starts collapsing, there are tunnels underneath, and there's an ancient god that has been summoned. A lot of damage to the city. But my thing is, it goes on for so long with nothing happening. It's there's action up top, and then for 15 minutes, it's just them crawling around in the tunnel and getting picked off one by one, not by supernatural things, but it's just the building collapsing. And it's just, to me, it goes nowhere. And then we have, there's a performance art segment, and this again reads to me very 90s. It's a performance art with where she implores early VR. And I was talking to my brother-in-law about this. I was like, when you say 1985, I don't think early VR. And he's like, no, that was the early to mid 90s was when all of that started. And so she essentially goes in to this reality and gets torn apart by this god. It's a whole thing about God and who they are, and it's a bunch of metaphorical stuff about that. And surprisingly, this short was everybody's favorite. It was my second least favorite. Because the VR, it almost reminds me of Lawnmower Man, which again, that does not scream 1985 to me. And it's a performance art piece, and she winds up dying. And it's okay. Okay. And then we have the second part of... So the first segment is connected to the second segment, which is called Ambrosia. And Ambrosia, the thing is, these two segments together, I would rather have this just been a full movie, or just this been the wraparound. I think in my head that would have made a lot more sense to make this the wraparound instead of two separate segments, because I felt like we were cheated out of another segment. So at Ambrosia, it's this big family reunion. At first I thought it was Thanksgiving, but it's just like a big family gathering, and we find out that they are responsible for the kids in the water up top. That it's a part of this ritual. Basically, when you come of age, you have to, like, you're 7. And so that's why. And so, to me, it starts out really great. But then it's a little unclear at the end that these are the kids coming to do the same thing to her that she did to them, I think. I don't know. That's what I interpreted it as. But I have a lot of questions about the logistics of the police sirens and things like that, because this is 1985. So I don't know. So that's the next segment. And then the last segment is just the end of our wraparound, where we find out everything that happened in the lab. And so to me, my big overall takeaways, it did not feel like 1985. I feel like there was so much that could have been tapped into that just wasn't. Like early VR, these tunnels, and it didn't feel like the 80s. I felt like there was so much potential. Like I said, you're at the height of Satanic Panic, and nobody is going to do anything about Satanic Panic. No one is going to do, like, some sort of play off of the traditional 80s slasher. No one is going to play into heavy metal or, like early computers. Nothing. And they didn't. And so that's just my big thing, is like with 94 and 99 both, I was like, this is so 99. Like, this is so 1999, when they're like on their little computer and like doing the spy videos on their neighbor. That's so 99 to early 2000s. In 94, the news footage and everything, I'm like, yep, this is so almost mid-90s. But I just felt like 85 fell flat. Oh, I forgot a segment. That's how unimpressed I was by this. So there is one segment that I believe is called Dream Kill, and a police station begins to receive these videos of murders before the murders take place. This cool goth kid, they bring him in. He's like, these are my dreams. Like, these are the things I'm dreaming. And it's like someone's recording my dreams. And so, come to find out, his dad's the killer. And I think the way that, like, the tapes are shot, I think is very cool. I think the concept is cool. I just think it needed to be fleshed out more. / I don't know if one segment was enough to cover this. I felt like there needed to be more. But that's how, I forgot a whole segment. That's how unimpressed I was. But yeah, to me, again, it did not feel 1985. The pacing was really inconsistent. And it was one of those where I can always tell how I feel about a movie by the amount of times I check to see how long there's left. And I kept checking multiple times. I was like, there's got to be more. Or like, maybe it's just really long. And it's not. It's about an hour and 51 minute runtime. But to me, I was really disappointed by it. And so I may be in the minority on that. But just to me personally, VHS 85, it's below the first VHS 2, 94, and 99. It would be those 4, and then 85, and then Viral. So, that's my little mini review. I just think that there were a lot of missed opportunities, a lot of things that could have been played off of. And obviously, in my famous disclaimer, I respect the hell out of people who make movies. I just write about them. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean it's bad, or just because I think something's good doesn't mean it's good. And so, it's all subjective. So take from that what you will. So, that's my review out of it. If I had to, give it a rating, I would give it, a 2.5 or 3 out of 5. I just was not a fan. But watch it and decide for yourself. So, now, what we're all here for, I'm sure, because our Greylock video, y'all really enjoyed it. So we have Greylock updates. So we have Greylock Tape 10, Messages from the Dead, that came out a couple weekends ago. I'm sorry, but this video is almost 20 minutes long, baby. And I'll put the link in the description. I just forgot how words worked. I'll put the link to the Greylock channel in the description below. Please follow them. Please comment, share, subscribe, everything. So, here we go. We start with more forest footage that's extremely reminiscent of the Blair Witch Project footage we saw in Tape 2. We find a dead mouse, which don't worry, we'll find out later on, you'll see, it's fake. It has to be fake. And someone picks it up with black gloves. It's still like, I'm such an animal person. Like, I truly love animals so much. And at first I was kind of like, yeah, but then the more they missed it, I was like, this has to be fake. So someone with a black gloved hand picked it up. I believe that this may be the same person from the end of Tape 4 that reaches in to pull down the window. Or at least they're in the same group. If you remember, the news said that the break-ins were, that a group was responsible for the break-ins. I am 99% sure those are the same black gloves. So they're either related to the person in Tape 2 or they are the person in Tape 2. So then, after they pick up the dead mouse, we cut back to Alexander and Tiffany's voicemail at 12:05 p.m. on 5/10/1987. And it's the same viewpoint and vantage point from Tape 9 of their voicemail. So Alexander calls Tiffany. He tells her to give him a call, not to worry about work. He emphasizes that she's more important, and it seems as though this has happened after they lost their child. So then after the first voicemail, we switch to what appears to be, it's like interrogation footage of Alexander. We find out that obviously and understandably, they took the loss of their baby extremely hard. Alexander took some time off work, so when he was going to go back to work, they agreed he would call her every day on his lunch break, and they talked every single day. And so Tiffany is not answering on this day, May 10th, 1987. And so Alexander immediately knows that something's wrong. And that's what he says in the video. It's like he knew instantly when she didn't answer. So then we cut from the interrogation footage to another message at 12:47 from Alexander. Tiffany still hasn't answered. So then we cut to what appears to be, it's a brief shot of candles gathered in a circle. It's like something you would see in some sort of ritual. Like, think of in Buffy or The Craft or any other movie where they do some sort of occult ritual and it's a circle of candles. And usually there's a pentagram in the center, but it's just like a circle of candles. And then we cut back to another message from Alexander at 1:13 p.m. And he said that he's headed home, that he's worried because she's not answering, he's just coming home. So then we cut to Dr. Heinrich Albrecht, and he's the medical examiner assigned to Tiffany's autopsy. And so it's footage of him from his POV of logging into his computer as he begins to log his findings for Tiffany's autopsy. And so this is one thing to note. Remember this. It also appears Tiffany died really close to her 28th birthday. So Dr. Albrecht starts to go over his findings. There appears to be black goo all over her face and neck. Her eyes are fully rolled back in her head. Someone carved some sort of runes or symbols into her chest and torso after she died, several hours after she died. They appear to be very post-mortem, several hours. And the biggest thing is Dr. Albrecht can't figure out what the actual cause of death was. And he really emphasizes that they need to find out what these symbols are. That he thinks that the key to discovering a lot of information about how she died or what happened in the hours leading up to her death is related to these symbols. So I would like to gloat about something. We'll get through this section first, but I would like to say I was right about something in the last video. Because if you're a horror analog fan like I am, there's no greater feeling than when you guess something that's going on in the series, but I digress. So, Dr. Albrecht emphasizes the meaning of these symbols. So then we cut to, it's a doctor with a redacted name and a partially concealed face, like there are black bars over his eyes and nose. And he's interviewing a 6-year-old Tiffany, also around her birthday, because he asks about her party. And so I think it has to do, there's some sort of coming of age thing with Tiffany. And so it turns out Tiffany is seeing the thought forms or another type of entity and has been for quite some time. And this is 22 years prior. I would like to momentarily gloat because I told y'all in the last video one of my theories was I think that Tiffany and Alexander had been being watched because they came up in that LBJ generation, and they have. They've been watching them. Would like to gloat, but moving on. So we cut back to Dr. Albrecht. And again, I'm not like, this is not me being jumpy in my notes. It's just very back and forth. But when you watch it, it flows. It's not, the choppiness doesn't take away from the content, I promise. So we cut back to Dr. Albrecht, and we have a photo of like his home office. So for some cases, he takes private notes and does private audio recordings at home. So we hear his personal account of Tiffany's autopsy, and so it turns out there were like electrical glitches, and like it sounds like there may have been like AC unit or heating unit issues, some of which are so severe that they might need to be repaired, and they only started when Tiffany's body came in. So like very mortuary's assistant, so like think like Autopsy of Jane Doe, mortuary's assistant. That's the vibe. So, just casual, like I said, just casual, like not at all like the Autopsy of Jane Doe, which definitely had a happy ending and definitely, everybody didn't die. We find out that Dr. Albrecht's assistant heard a woman crying in the drawers, like where the drawers are in the cooler. And he just sends her home and says, oh, you just had a traumatic day, it's fine. But then we found out Dr. Albrecht heard them too. And so he basically just sent her home, but he fully heard them too. So then we cut to security footage from the cooler in the morgue, and we get to hear the crying for ourselves, and I just got chills because it's so freaky. And I think it sounds kind of similar. It wouldn't surprise me if you remember when Arnold gets, and it's like has all those voices and things. I think that it's one of those creatures. I do. So then we cut back to Tiffany's interview from when she was 6. And the doctor tells Tiffany they're going to do an exercise. He begins to play this creepy ass music to like assist her into kind of a trance-like state. It seems like a type of hypnosis. And so Tiffany closes her eyes, and by the way, just to clarify, this is told through like text, and there are images of the two of them. So it's all audio. And I just want to emphasize that before we get into later when I talk about how impressive this all is. So she closes her eyes, and the doctor begins to walk her through what seems to be like a type of hypnosis or meditative exercise. And, of course, it's just a doctor helping a patient, Of course not. Of course it's not. It never is. It's never just we're going to listen on this therapy session. Of course not. So the Dr. Redacted, directs Tiffany to see the day growing darker around her, for her to be covered in moonlight, which I think ties into earlier, if you remember in an earlier tape, I believe it was tape 2, that intruder cuts to the moon. We also find out in a tape about how that planet crashed into ours and there are pieces of our moon. So I do believe this is a reference and a continued theme of like the moon is responsible for the creature within the moon is responsible for a lot of these things and tied into these things. And so he tells her to see herself covered in moonlight. She's in her front yard, and he tells her to open the front door of her house. He instructs her to go into her bedroom while he rattles off an uncomfortable amount of details, like copious details about how her home is set up, features within her home, down to like the stickers on her bedroom door. So my theory is I think that he is either watching the footage from inside their home while doing this exercise, or he has seen the footage. Yeah, that's my theory, is that I think that he has either seen this footage or he's currently watching it, and that's partially why he told her to close her eyes. So she goes into her room, and then he tells her, he's like, what is different? And she finds a door next to her window. It's a black door with sigils on it, which, you know, is always great in horror. So then the audio briefly distorts, and Tiffany says there's someone in the room in the door she opened. The doctor tells her she's alone, but Tiffany is adamant that she's not, that there's a tall man in the room. My guess is maybe from tape 9, that same skeletal type creature. That's my guess. But anyway, the doctor begins to try to bring her out of this like state of hypnosis, and the audio continues to distort. And Tiffany asks the man who he is, and then we're jump scared by the photo from her obituary. And I would just like to take a moment to say that I think that this part, the interview part, really speaks to Rob Gavagan's talents, because to me, it's the most unsettling part of the video, and it's just audio. There are no visuals outside of the picture of the doctor and Tiffany. It's just like a little black and white photo of each. Just like almost headshots. And I think that it just speaks to Rob Gavagan's talent, that this is so unsettling, and it's just audio. It's just audio. So if you had any doubts about this video being very good, it's worth watching for the interview alone. The whole thing is phenomenally done, but just for even the interview alone, that just audio that makes your skin crawl, it's worth watching that alone. So then we cut back to the gloved person/entity as they begin to cut open the dead mouse, which is now clearly fake, thank God. Like, it's clear, in front of several copies of, you know, everybody's favorite magazine, Gun Digest. Great. So this person pulls out a small cassette tape from the mouse, and the tape appears to be addressed to Jim Melgren, who, if you remember, is the investigator that Arnold Rivers asked for all of his videos and tapes to be given to. And then the symbol that we saw from Tiffany's autopsy notes that was carved into her body also flashes on the screen. And the voice on the tape is clearly disguised, and they flat out tell Melgren that they won't say who they are or why they're contacting him. They say that they're honestly surprised he's made it this far, but like, he's done stuff in his past to get to this point. It almost reminds me of like Jigsaw talking to Detective Matthews, kind of is the vibe. And so they say that they're surprised he's made it this far, but, you know, he's basically fought his whole life, and they claim that they're going to tell him a story that he's dying to hear. So then we cut back to the morgue, where Tiffany's drawer pops open as we hear crying, and you can kind of see Tiffany's face in the corner, and it looks very similar to like the black and white circular mask faces. And I also think this is the one thing I've not been able to decipher. And so if you do know, leave it in the comments below, because I'm not sure. I can't tell if it's a reflection off of the floor, because the floor is linoleum, or if there's a shadow from a thought form that helps pop open that drawer. I can't tell. It's very possible, because these are so detail oriented, it's just a shadow from the linoleum floor. There's a sheen on it, or a glare. But I want to hear y'all's opinions, because I think it may be a thought form. So we cut back to Tiff, who's clearly not Tiff. And then we end on a photo of Tiffany's face that begins glitching into other mutilated faces, as well as the symbol we saw earlier in the video. So, couple thoughts here. My theory is, if you recall, and I believe it was tape 9, there's a footage of like a closet that opens and we see a white face. I think that is Alexander slowly opening the closet door to reveal what is Tiffany, because the face that looks in the morgue looks very similar to that face. So I think Tiffany is some sort of conduit, or was the gateway for these creatures. And I think that closet shot may have been Alexander and Tiffany. And then my second thought, I don't know if I'm the only one, but this is giving me big Twin Peaks vibes. Because you have the tall man, the symbolism throughout, the smiling photos of Tiffany that look like Laura Palmer's, prom photos. This is giving me big Twin Peaks vibe, but like Twin Peaks, but like on steroids, and like leaning more into like the really horror pieces. So that's what I think so far. I think that Tiffany is the key to a lot of this. I think that Jim Melgren is going to be a key player in videos moving forward. I think that Jim Melgren may have even been the one who cut the rat open, meaning that he is somehow involved with this other group, if my theory about the gloved hands belonging to the same people or group are the same. And I'm just really excited. Like, Rob, God, you are making these videos are phenomenal. And, it wouldn't be a video if I didn't use my catchphrase of look to YouTube for the future of horror, but it's, guys, when content like this is coming out, you can't fault me for saying it all the time. Because this video is one of the best videos of an analog horror series I've ever seen. And I wholeheartedly mean that. And it's 20 minutes. And I was like, this is better than some horror movies I've watched recently, including 1985. Including VHS 85. But yeah, so that's where we're going to leave it for now. I'm sure, because I'm filming this a little in advance, I'm sure there's probably going to be another video now. We will talk about it in another video. With Greylock, we did more of an overall summary. So I may not update the blog, but we will talk about it in videos. And like I said, we will also, I promise. Excuse me, that's so gross. But we will also talk about the Project Earth new video, I promise. And I will update it in the piece, because we go video by video, and we will talk about it on the channel in a couple weeks, I promise, because I am obsessed with Project Earth as well. But yeah, so I think, just to reiterate, 6 pieces of content throughout the last full week of October. So this week, VHS, Ode to My Mom and Brother-in-Law, Fear Itself, Punk Rock Horror, Child's Play franchise. Another piece coming at you tomorrow about my favorite Final Girls. Bite Size Sundays are going to be just through October. They're going to be the 10 recommendations on a curated list. You only get that exclusive here in the video, and you can only find them on Instagram. Be sure to follow me on Instagram at Lisa_Frankenstein_. I hope you've been enjoying all of my October content. I've been doing the Nightmare on Film Street 31-day horror challenge. I've been doing, yesterday I just started my 13 days of costumes that I do every year. And I hope you've just been enjoying all the spoopy content on my channel. Please follow Elliot, reading.with.red. Her bookstagram is awesome. She does recommendations. She puts in her bio what she's currently reading so you can read along. And you should definitely give our fearless editor, creative consultant, my other creative half a follow. And then follow us on Instagram at bmovies.channel. It's the only place you can find daily posts. We post daily on we post daily on what blogs are going over on bmovies.blog. And so you can get daily content. It's where Bite Size Sundays exclusively live. We just do some fun teasers sometimes. And so definitely give us a follow. And then be sure to obviously follow this channel, like, subscribe, share. I've been having a blast. I know I keep saying this, but I've been having a blast doing YouTube. I was so scared to start. And now I've just really come to love our little conversations. And so I think with all of that out of the way, all that's left to do is fade to black.